Hello, my AP US history friends. Going to do a quick review video for you before your quiz. If you're an A day, you're tomorrow. If you're a B day, you're on Friday. This will also help you out for our eventual Unit 3 exam. So this will kind of be like a first half of Unit 3 review, and I'll do the second half before your next test. Anyways, taking a look at Unit 3 as a whole, Unit 3 runs from 1750 to 1800. It encompasses the American Revolution, the time period before the American Revolution, and then the founding documents of the country, like the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and then the presidencies of Washington and Adams. However, for your quiz, we're only going up to the end of the American Revolution. The first part of this video, I'll cover the content information. The second part, I will cover skills-based stuff, so writing like a context and thesis statement. So, anyways, as a reminder, your quiz is going to be 8 to 10 ID terms. Please be short on your answers. Please be short on your answers. One sentence max. Just tell me what the thing is. We're trying to move quicker in our writing. After that, I'm going to give you a thesis. You got to give me 3 pieces of specific evidence and explain why they answered the thesis. And then lastly, I'm going to give you a prompt. You have to write an introduction. Again, we're looking to be quick. We are going to time it out so you have some pacing for yourself to try to help you out. But anyways, let's just dive right into the content information. So leading up to the American Revolution, the United States develops a revolution mindset. They do this through a number of factors. The Enlightenment, which has the specific ID term of rationalism, allows us to or creates this feeling of questioning government as a whole. Like, why are we paying taxes to a king when they really don't do much for us? The king is also a couple thousand miles away, would take a month or so to get even information, maybe even longer to get information from England to the colonies. So that also sparks the question of, wait, why are we letting this guy rule us again? Why are we paying taxes? The Americans also have an independent mindset in the sense that they have charters that already exist. They have colonial charters. We told you the story about Connecticut's and like the oak tree, right? But anyways, we already have government at home, and we're already defending ourselves from the natives. So if the government isn't really providing us laws or structure or protection, why do we have them as a government? It's a legitimate question. So it leads to this independent mindset. The other contributing factor to this is that the United States is experiencing a time period as known as salutary neglect. This time period is where England essentially allows the colonies to govern themselves. They're hardly enforcing any of the laws that they had passed, such as the navigation laws that's supposed to stop smuggling. They're not enforcing those yet. It's not until after the French and Indian War, where the British are going to need to pay back their debts, that they start actually enforcing law in the colonies, such as the Navigation Acts, in the hope of reducing smuggling. So then you buy more goods from the British, and then you have to pay more taxes on it. So the end of salutary neglect is found after the French and Indian War, also known as the 7 Years' War. Again, this is not France versus England. This is France versus England. This is not France versus natives, right? That's not what they mean. It's France versus England with native allies on each side. Long story short, the British are victorious. If you want to cover that, you'll take like a more of a European history course. We don't really care so much. We just care about the outcomes. So the results of the war for the American side of it, at least as it impacts us, with a British victory, the British do get like Spanish Florida. The French are now kicked out of the North American continent, but they will be back to sell us Louisiana at some point. It also shows like direct rule over the colonies. Like the British Army is physically on the North American continent. Later on, it's going to help inspire the French to join the American cause in the Revolution, so that France can, mess with England, but also maybe regain some of the territory that they had lost. But it really leads to this idea of no taxation without representation. That is like the major, major concept, right? It's the most key term of Unit 3 by a lot because it explains the American cause of the Revolution. There's a political cause, which is probably the most important one of the without representation part. The no taxation part is the economic part. The Americans are upset that they are not allowed to establish their own economies and are forced to pay taxes for things in which they don't have a say. The taxes themselves are not specifically that big of a deal. It's not like it's a ton of money or something like that. It's the fact that the Americans don't have a say in this system known as mercantilism, where the British are controlling the trade of the colonies. You can see the political cartoon there, right? Anyways, the British are in a whole bunch of debt following the French and Indian War, meaning they start levying taxes on the Americans, things like the Sugar Act and the Stamp Act and the Tea Act, as well as enforcing those navigation laws again. They also exude political control. Now, let me stop here for a second. On your quizzes, there are two different versions. I basically already told you what you're going to need to do when I give you a claim. One of those claims is going to be to explain the economic causes of the American Revolution. That's where you would focus on like mercantilism, and you would focus on the different taxes, and maybe even like the proclamation line that keeps America out of territory for the fur trade, as shown in the picture here. There are also political causes, which the other version of the quiz is going to be explain the political causes of the American Revolution. Well, there's where you would go into we're not getting representation in Congress. There are things like the Quartering Act, right, where it is going to be forced upon us to take care of British soldiers and such. I guess you could argue that's social, economic, and political, but for this case, let's go with political. Also, something like the Declaratory Act, which is definitely political because the British government is claiming that the American colonists are British citizens and therefore must follow British law. That would be another good example if you got version B and got the political one. So make sure we know both. Make sure we know 3 economic causes of the American Revolution and 3 political causes. There will be more as I go through these slides, but this is just a good place to start discussing it. Sort them. What do they? Some are cross, some hit both, right? But no, make sure you know 3 political and 3 economic causes of the American Revolution, right? That is also summed up in no taxation without representation. That is both, right? Because the no taxation is the economic part and the without representation is the political part. We also know that this statement is true. Supporting evidence later on in this slideshow is the Olive Branch Petition, in which the Americans say that they are willing to work with the British, go back to before really violent interactions occur between the colonists and the English, as long as they get representation in Parliament. However, the British say no to this, right? Leading to the American Revolution. So really the political sphere, the without representation part, is more important to the Americans, but no taxation without representation is an explanation of both the economic and political causes, right? Anyways, because of these British taxes that are now being levied on the colonies, we decide that we need to get on the same page. There's letters from A Farmer by John Dickinson. It basically just makes the argument that the colonies need to unite under one system. 2 groups are also formed: the Sons of Liberty, led by Samuel Adams. They eventually commit the Boston Tea Party, and the Daughters of Liberty. Women's most notable or most important contribution to the American Revolution War effort is their making of homespun goods, so we don't have to buy British-based goods, right? We talked a lot about the Boston Massacre. We did a whole activity on it. We know that it's propaganda in the sense that is 5 people dying really a massacre? And you can see even in the engraving here by Paul Revere that the British look like they are sort of lined up and ordered to fire. We know it's way more complicated than that. Our friend John Adams is going to point that out as he defends the British in the Boston Massacre and basically makes the claim moving forward that America needs to have a well-regulated judicial system. We're going to see that as well when we talk about the trials being moved over to London. Anyways, other content information. The Sons of Liberty commit the Boston Tea Party. I know we discussed this as well. These 2 events really make Boston the hotbed of the American Revolution. Massachusetts as a whole, but specifically Boston, is going to be in support of the revolution the most, and they're also the ones that get punished the most. A term that will definitely appear on both versions of your test are the intolerable acts. Your quiz, excuse me, are the intolerable acts. That's what the Americans call them, right? There are political and economic causes in here. These would be a good example, right, for you to use in your 3 pieces of evidence used to prove something, right? Proves the claim. Boston Harbor is closed. That is huge economically. Trials are held in London instead of the colonies. That's really going to annoy us, but that's a political cause, right? Martial law is also a political cause. That is the British Army taking control of Boston and Massachusetts as a whole. These are all causes of the American Revolution. Again, we want to know the political and the economic causes, right? Because of the intolerable acts that the Americans are so upset about, they formed the First Continental Congress. Again, we don't need to know a ton about this. We just need to know that the colonies are once again getting on the same page. They are getting together in terms of teamwork before this all starts. So, in between the First Continental Congress and the Second Continental Congress, there are 2 major things that really contribute from taking this from a revolt to an independence war. to a revolution. Those two events are the publication of Thomas Paine's Common Sense, which basically makes a enlightenment, rational, common sense, all sort of used as the same term, argument for why the Americans should break away from England and become their own country. The other event that occurs is the first major battle, major skirmish, if you will, of the American Revolution, Lexington and Concord. Again, I know I had explained this in class in a high level of detail, but basically, we need to make this war last as long as humanly possible. That's America's best chance of winning. Our other best chance of winning, similar to making it last longer, is make it cost more money. Make the revolution cost more money. How do you do that? Make sure that the British have to resupply themselves all the time. So start stealing their goods, which is what the Americans do at Concord. The British come to try to get the goods from the Americans at Concord, and they are beaten back and forced all the way back to Boston. All the way back, the Americans commit guerrilla-style war against the British, hiding in trees, jumping out for surprise attacks, stuff like that. It's going to be pretty common that we do through most of the Revolution. Anyways, Common Sense plus the Lexington and Concord, also located near Boston, by the way, another example of the hotbed of the Revolution, right, leads to the Second Continental Congress. So another team meeting of the colonies in which they are going to send the Olive Branch Petition, which was basically a letter to King George saying, hey, we're really sorry about our side. If you're sorry about your side, as long as you give us representation in Congress, or in Parliament, excuse me, we will, go back to being British citizens and follow your law again. That would be another political cause. The British rejecting the Americans' proposal of political compromise there. The British say no, which leads to the Declaration of Independence, which we also covered in a decent amount of detail. The Declaration of Independence, sometimes called a breakup letter, it sort of is. It also sort of is a declaration of what America is going to try to make as our foundational ideals as a country, right? That's really what we're going for there. We already talked a lot about the strategy as well. Again, nobody's really going to ask you about this, but the Americans do want to fight a war of attrition, meaning they make it last a long time. They use guerrilla tactics to fight, such as shooting British officers purposely at the start of battles, so they have little or no direction. So we do get, charged with this idea that we are committing a guerrilla war, which we kind of are. And then lastly, we want to make an alliance with a European country. That's going to end up being France after the Battle of Saratoga, right? That's one that I guarantee is on there as well, as Saratoga. It inspires the French to join. We saw this image as well, used as propaganda by the Americans, because if they don't join the war effort, this is what's going to happen to them. They're going to get divided up. Another issue we discussed was how about a third of the colonists were actually in support of the revolution. Most of that third are like wealthy individuals in the colonies. They're mostly merchants. They mostly exist on the seaboard in coastal cities. The other third is not that supportive of the war. They're known as loyalists or loyal to King George. They're mostly poorer farmers, don't deal with the British on like a day-to-day basis, like the merchants and people do in shipping towns and coastal towns. They deal with the British on a daily basis. These farmers in these backwood country areas do not really deal with the British all that much. So they have no real inspiration for the revolution quite yet. And another third are sort of undecided at the start of the war. We covered a bunch of these as well. This is where Saratoga comes in. We also talked about General Washington's best qualities. He's super good at getting out of tight situations. He ends up being great at retreating. But remember, a win for us in the Revolutionary War is different than a win for the British. A win for the British is taking the land, taking the field, and also wiping out the colonists. A win for the colonists is just surviving. Can you make this war last longer? So our definition of victory is definitely different, which is going to elongate the war. Other qualities about Washington that are good. He's sort of seen as like a mythological individual at this point. Like this legend is building about him, and so he keeps the morale of the men up really well. He also listens to others. Like the person I claim is my favorite general in the American Revolution, and somebody I consider significant that doesn't get talked about a lot is Nathaniel Greene. Anyways, we already talked about homespun goods. Another factor for women in the Revolution are camp followers that follow around Washington's camp and do the things that you would probably expect. They do laundry, they make uniforms, they cook, they clean, all of those things. They're vital to the war effort and get no shine, which is why I throw them out here. We also covered, these women as well, Molly Pitcher, Deb Sampson, and Sybil Ludington. Sybil Ludington, local history. We love local history. That might be another good extra credit question. And then we just have a summary slide here of how the Americans eventually win the war and pull the upset. with getting the French involved, shout out Ben Franklin and John Adams, in the Battle of Saratoga was absolutely crucial. We needed the French Navy. They were sort of the only ones that could kind of compete with the British in terms of naval power. We need them to distract the British Navy and naval blockades. And actually, when the British get cut off at Yorktown, they're in desperate need of the British Navy to show up and get them out of Yorktown because they're sort of trapped against the sea. But the French are really taking all their attention away, so that was a huge help. Hold field advantage in guerrilla war, we talked about that as well, causing the British debt, and then lack of loyalist support. It's difficult for them to reach these loyalists when they live in low-level populated areas far away from the coast. Um, Anyways, the lasting impacts, don't worry about for now. We're not going to ask those on your quiz. Those will be more of a part two of unit 3 thing. One more thing before you leave. We talked about writing context and thesis. So I just wanted to show for you again my model context. In a context, we must start with the words in the time period leading up to. We must also use specific ID terms, right? So we would say, like, in the time period leading up to whatever the prompt is asking you to talk about, in this case, the development of the American Revolution, right? In the time period leading up to British imperial policies on the American colonies. So, causes of the American Revolution, what was going on. For Unit 3, we had 5 terms that we really wanted to see in our introduction. They were the Enlightenment, salutary neglect, and the end of it because of the French and Indian War or the 7 Years' War, um, causing debt for the British. So that's 3. No taxation without representation. We definitely want to see in there as much as we can. And mercantilism. Those would be great to have in your context to set the stage for why the American Revolution is going to happen. So this is just a model context example. It is on your introduction paragraph writing assignment if you want to check it out. But for some reason you can't access it, I just wanted to leave it up here. This is what a model thesis or model context would look like for Unit 3. I wrote it myself, so pretty well written. But also covers all of those topics. You don't need to do this much. This is a lot. 3 to 4, 3 to 5 sentences for the context. That's it. Then looking at our thesis. Theses, theses. I made that joke about the plural of thesis. They need to be debatable. You need to read your statement and tell me if it's debatable or not. So you want to say the most significant cause or the least significant cause or something like that. That is helpful for you. So you make it debatable. You also want to have specific evidence. Remember, if you ever use the words political, social, economic, or technological, they must be married to a term. They must be married to a term. They have to, connect is the thing, because that's not specific. Just saying economic is not specific. But saying mercantilism, that's specific. That's what I'm looking for, right? So anyways, just wanted to leave this model paragraph up here. I think that's all I got for you in terms of review for your quiz. Let me know if there are absolutely any questions. I am here if you need them. Remember, really focus on the political and economic causes of the American Revolution. They can be sorted into categories fairly easily. Talk to you later. Bye.